Now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Oh my God, you have those moments where you get to hang out or interact with just spectacular people. And this hour, you're going to hang out and visit with the famous Erich von Däniken, and we're going to pick his brain and find out everything he knows about ancient aliens and extraterrestrials. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. Let me tell you a little bit about Erich and get him on the air. For over 45 years, Erich von Däniken has pursued the theory which postulates that the Earth has been visited by extraterrestrials in the remote past. Erich, the world's most successful nonfiction writer of all time, has written 55 books and e-media on the topic and has sold over 65 million copies worldwide. A man who probably doesn't need an introduction on this show. His webpage is Däniken.com. Please welcome Erich von Däniken. Hey, Erich, how are you?
Well, I'm sitting in Switzerland. It's blue sky. The mountains are full with white snow. It's very spectacular.
Well, that just sounds wonderful. I'm sitting here in Texas, and we have blue skies, no snow. Thank God.
Okay.
Erich, you are the godfather of the ancient alien theory. And my question to you is not about the theory, but what made you first suspect, that just had that inkling that the gods of the Bible or the gods that we worship and pray to were not omnipotent beings like we've been taught to believe, but instead were extraterrestrials?
Well, it's a long, long time ago. You see, I was educated in Switzerland as a strict Catholic. And for 6 years, I was in a boarding school in Switzerland led by Jesuits. So I was a boy with 16 years, and I was a deep, deep believer in the concept of God. By the way, I still believe in God, although I cannot explain it. So at that time, when I was a boy, I said to myself, some minimum qualities. For example, God would never make a mistake, or God is out of time. He would not need to make an experience and then he has to wait what the result is, what the outcome is. Or God, of course, would never need a vehicle to move from point A to point B. God is all over. So in this boarding school, we had to translate parts of the Bible from Latin to Greek and from Greek to German. And there I learned that the God of the Old Testament had none of these minimum qualities. God made mistakes. He used vehicles. He made experiences, and he didn't know the result in advance. So I was simply shocked, and I had doubts in my own religious education. And I wanted to find out if other communities in antiquity have similar stories of flying beings descending from the clouds with smoke, fire, loud noise, trembling and so on. That was the beginning of everything, and it all ended with the book Chariots of the Gods.
What made you make the connection, connect the dots between these characters that you were reading about in the Bible and other mythology or philosophical systems and extraterrestrials? Because I would think back in that day, the notion of extraterrestrials wasn't that, I'm going to say, popular.
No, it was not popular at all. You see, I was always aware, I always knew that our Stone Age ancestors, they had some natural religions. For example, our Stone Age people, some 10,000 years ago, they did not know why the lightning flashes down from the sky. They could not understand what the thunder was. Maybe they were victims of an earthquake or something. So they started to be afraid of nature. And the first religions we had on our planet were definitely natural religions. But then, of a sudden, something changed. Beings from the clouds, from the sky, descended to the humans. Now, how can you make a difference between these beings and natural religion? I mean, a lightning is also descending from the cloud, or a thundering is coming from the cloud. The difference is between the knowledge. You see, these beings from outer space, these so-called gods, they teach humans. They say to them, look, human, go there, and if you are there, you will see a little light. And you humans, you call this little light moon. But the moon has in reality no light. The moon receives his light from the sun. And then they explained, our humans, the moon, why the high moon, the low moon, and all these things are working. So it was information in astronomy, sometimes information about the date, about our calendar, about the leap year, etc. And all this was not the same as nature. Nature did not speak. Nature did not give scientific information. So we have to make a difference between the natural gods and the ones from outer space. So that was the next link I had. Of course, in the beginning, I was still very young, then about 19, 20 years old. All my friends said, Erich, you must be crazy. And in the school, I was, the padres, the teachers, they were all professors. I talked to them very friendly. What about this? And they just said, Erich, you must read more and more in the Bible and more of our holy books, then you will understand. And I read and read and read, and my understanding came more and more confused.
But after all of that reading, did you find that your belief in the gods being extraterrestrials increase, or did you just get more confused?
No, it definitely increased. Of course, I made some mistakes. You know, when you are a young man, by the way, at that time, I came from the family of hotel business. My mother and my father, they were owner of a hotel. So after my high school, I first went into the hotel business. There were times when I was simply a waiter. I was a cook. I was sitting at the reception desk. I was in the hotel school for 2.5 years. And when I wrote Chariots of the Gods, I was the managing director of a first-class hotel in Switzerland. So I had to work at the same time to make money. So, of course, my belief in the extraterrestrials God, they came stronger and stronger. All through, I made some mistakes. When you are young, you are not self-critical enough. You believe everything what someone says. And you know, you always want to have right. So in Chariots of the Gods, there are a few mistakes, which I was criticized for. That's okay. But later you learn and learn and learn, and you do not make the same mistakes a second time.
Whether you're young or old, it seems like you gather the information, you synthesize it the best you can, and you present it, you know, as best you can with the best meaning that you can. And, you know, are you 100% correct all of the time? No, not necessarily.
Nobody is. I mean, yeah. We are all making mistakes, of course. But the belief, in the meantime, it's not the belief anymore. I have too many indications, I would even say too many proofs, which clearly show this planet was visited by beings from outer space. And before these beings left, they promised to our ancestors to return one day again back to Earth. That's why in every religion, still today, in every living religion, we all have the expectation of the return of some gods. We Christians, we believe that Jesus will return one day. But the Muslim society believes their Mahdi will return one day. As we know, the Buddhistic society expects the returning of Buddha, or the great Jewish community, they wait for the return of their Messiah. So this promise of return is very, very old. And I am afraid not every religion can be right. Some of them must be wrong. So what happens if they all are wrong? Somebody will return. But I guess neither Messiah or Jesus or Mahdi or Buddha, simply extraterrestrials.
I have a question for you. When we look at the stories, the mythology, the legends that come out of cultures around the world, as you're suggesting, the return of the gods or a messiah, we find that same storyline or lots of different storylines, stories of the flood, stories of them coming from the sky. In each of these cultures that seem isolated, we find it in Australia, we find it in the New World, we find it obviously in Europe and the Middle East. Any idea how these stories manage to make it all the way around the world?
Well, I make an example with Christianity. We know that we had a wonderful figure called Jesus Christ. He was living in Jerusalem some 2,000 years ago. We know from the Gospels that he died and etc. So we know all this story. Then a Christian culture appears. That Christian culture has constructed great cathedrals, wonderful churches, wonderful high altars, wonderful music. I think of Sebastian Bach with their orchestra, etc. It's all a Christian cultures, but no architect, no painter, no artist, no musicians was eyewitness at the time of Jesus. They all just worked out of tradition. The same thing happened with the extraterrestrials. Some of our ancestors, they saw these extraterrestrials. They had direct contact. And then it turned into mythology. And mythology grows all over the planet. Maybe different cultures had some visits of these extraterrestrials. Not everyone. And later, because of the knowledge in tradition, they start to make cave paintings. They start to sculpt the gods into their temples and so on. So it is not necessary that these extraterrestrials were all over the world. But the traditions have grown all over the world, like Christianity, like every other religion.
And the part that I would like to throw in is it sounds like from your perspective, the stories that have come down to us, you believe there is a basis in fact at some point in time in our past.
Definitely. Yes, you see, these extraterrestrials, they behave themselves like today's ethnologists would do. They studied a few tribes, they learned a few language, they gave a few advice how life could be easier, and then they disappeared with the promise to return in the faraway future. But I think they just did not disappear without any proof. They left something behind, something which I call a time capsule. In this time capsule, we would find some writings in whatever form, on which we are explained we were here from that and that planet with that and that technology for that and that reason. We found that and that here. We talked to them, etc. We will return. But the problem is, if you make a deposit, I call it a time capsule, somewhere in the earth, you have to be very careful that during the next 5,000 years, this time capsule is not destroyed, be it by earthquakes, be it by great flood, be it by ants or animals or whatever. So how do you manage this? We have to think what would be a logical place to look for a time capsule left behind by the extraterrestrials some thousands of years ago. One possibility is that they left, for example, a simple satellite, a satellite surrounding the Earth, not bigger than a football. Now, in this satellite, they would know it is not destroyed, neither by great flood, neither by earthquakes, neither by animals, ants, and whatever. But the problem is now, you planned this satellite 5,000 years in the past around the orbit of the Earth. How do you manage it now that the humans, 5,000 years later, go and look for the satellite? The humans have to have a reason to seek, to search, to make researches. Even if you have a time capsule, let's say someone beneath the pyramid, somebody in the future has to come to the idea, hey, there must be something. So they left indications, and these indications we can prove. In my over 35 books, I have published many of these indications. Some of them are maybe perfectly wonderful, others may be bad. It's on to the scientific community to make a choice what is reasonable and what is unreasonable. But at least because of all these indications, we have now the question. We have the question, something was wrong in our past, in prehistoric time. Now we ask, why can't we explain that? Was there maybe a higher civilization at that time than our civilization today? If not, have we been visited by extraterrestrials? And if we have been visited by extraterrestrials, where is the concrete proof? That's exactly the situation we have today. Because of the indications, we have now the question. Now it's time for a scientific community to look, to search for what I call the time capsule, and we will find it.
What kind of indications are you talking about? Can you give a few examples?
Of course. Everyone knows ancient Greek. Ancient Greece is full of temples. Everybody knows maybe of Delphi, of Epidaurus, of different old ancient temples. Now, all these temples are linked together in the same distance with the same geometrical angle. There is a whole network over antique Greece. Now, one could say, well, maybe the old Greeks, they planned their temples in a geometrical pattern. Because in Greece, we had wonderful mathematicians like Euclid, for example, or Plato, or Pythagoras. But all these temples existed already in Stone Age time. So there was a holy place in Stone Age time, which later becomes a temple like Delphi and Epidaurus. So this geometrical pattern was laid down before Euclid, before Pythagoras, before Plato. It is older. Now, our Stone Age people, they knew nothing about mathematics and geometry. Why should they put their temples in the same distance from one to another, in the same geometrical angle? And in some cases, these temples are far away from one to each other. For example, between Greece and the Mediterranean islands of Creta, there's a distance which you cannot look over by the naked eye. So there was a planning behind it. Who made this planning? I suggested these extraterrestrials were worshipped by the humans as the gods. Of course, the extraterrestrials knew we are not gods. They even told them, you should make no pictures about God. We are not gods. But the humans adored them, and the humans may said, we want to create some memory for you, for a temple for the future generations. And the so-called gods said, okay, we accept this, but please make your temple exactly at this place and not at another, and the next temple at this place, etc. They knew that mankind, after a few thousand years, would be able to fly. And they knew that mankind, after a few thousand years, they would make maps on their landscapes. And sooner or later, they would realize something is wrong here because of the same distance and the same angles. And that's exactly the indications which they put on purpose in the deep past for mankind of the future.
Do you find similar patterns of, I'm going to say, more contemporary structures, speaking like Greek, being built onto older structures, and then this network or pattern being formed as well?
Exactly. That's exactly the case. All these Greek temples existed in Stone Age temples and Stone Age times. They were primitive holy places in Stone Age times. You see, today, when you have a place of pilgrim, for example, some children say, we had a vision of the Holy Mother of Jesus. Now, this pilgrim place in the beginning is only an altar. Later, it's a little chapter. Then more and more people can buy if they want to visit the holy place. Then the first church is built. And later the first hotel and the first water pipes, etc. So all these pilgrim places, they grow and grow from deep antiquity to the present. The same thing happened in ancient Greece. In prehistoric time, in Stone Age time, there was already a primitive holy place there. And later, the places grow to Delphi, to Epidaurus, to whatever it is, the Acropolis, etc. But we also have such things in other places of the world. For example, in French Brittany, which is not too far away from my place. It's about 700 kilometers from Switzerland. In French Brittany, they are thousands and thousands of stones made out of granite in specific lines. Now, there were speculations over the centuries. For what have our Stone Age persons made these stone lines? It was suggested maybe it's just a place for astronomy where you can watch the stars, you can see how the moon goes up, etc., etc. Only a few decades ago, it was in 1976, the whole places were photographed and filmed by helicopters. And then they make the pattern on Earth, and they realized that these stone lines are not standing there by coincidence. It's all a geometrical pattern. It's always the same length of 2,650 meters. It's always the same angles, or exactly the half of 2,560 meters. So we find Pythagorean triangles in the ground made out in stones from a Stone Age society which knew nothing about Pythagoras. Again, it is not my ideas that extraterrestrials, they move stone around. No, they never made their hands dirty. They simply ordered to our forefathers, please, bring these stones there and there. Maybe they helped them how it was easier to move them, because they know exactly in a far future, mankind will find out that this is geometry.
Is that why we...
Ich kann Menschen reden in einem Interview. Yes, continue.
Is that why, as a culture or as humanity, we really don't have any recollection of why they were built in the first place, why we erected these stones, why we erected monoliths, why we, have these standing stones around the world?
That's exactly the point. It was not made by coincidence. It was not made because of some calendar, including Stonehenge. It has all a meaning which goes back to the so-called gods, which were the extraterrestrials some thousands of years ago. It is not coincidence. It is made on purpose. The reason is that we, humans, in modern time, in the time of aircraft, in the time of measuring, that we recognize of a sudden, hey, something is wrong here on this planet. And this does not fit to the Stone Age, primitive Stone Age forefathers. So we have to ask new questions. The facts are here, on the ground, on the land, and not only there, they are also here in the Holy Scriptures.
They're in every culture. I have to ask you, I remember seeing, I think it was in Search of Ancient History. I don't even remember the name of the show. It was, from the 70s. And you were on the show, and they showed the lines of Nazca. And I have to tell you, I held my breath. I was just so shocked by those images. When you went there for the first time, what was your impression?
Ich kann im Moment nicht reden. Ich bin in einem Interview. Sorry. Yes, I was first in Nazca in 1959. Nazca was not known at that time. Only a few persons knew that there are some lines in the ground. Now, really, on television and even in the so-called scientific books, I read some nonsense about Nazca. This is incredible. The real pictures of Nazca are never shown on television, nowhere. You find them only in my book. Nazca is a mystery. First of all, when you are on the ground of Nazca, it's just a desert like other deserts. There are black stones, black and brown stones, and brown sand. Soon as you fly a little over the desert of Nazca, the first thing you see are figures. Figures in the sand, scratched out, figures like fishes, monkeys, spiders, and so on. Then you fly higher again. Then you see lines. These lines look like airstrips. They start abruptly, they end abruptly. The longest about it is 3.6 kilometers long. Then you go even higher. And then you see in the middle, in the midst of all these things, figures and lines, you see even longer lines, but these longer lines are small, about 1.5 meter large. But long, the longest of it is 23 kilometers long, crossing hills and mountains, etc. So Nazca is a whole mystery. Now, of course, it is possible to make small figures in the ground by scratching away the surface. This is absolutely understandable. You scratch away the dirty, the brown stones, and then it comes a little brighter, a little shinier, the ground. So you can make figures out of that. But this does not explain the gigantic lines. Sometimes the top of a mountain was cut off, completely cut off, and they put one of these lines looking like an airstrip. By the way, I never said it is an airstrip. I always said, seen from the air, it looks like an airstrip. I have in my archive around 5,000 pictures about Nazca. And whenever I have an archaeologist here, and we look at these pictures in color at the computer, they say, Erich, this is impossible, this is not Nazca. I say, I'm sorry, this is Nazca. Television has never shown the true Nazca.
But when you talk about these lines, the ones that look like runways, and, you know, in my mind, the one that is the 23 kilometers long, are they straight? I mean, if someone is taking a stick and carving into the ground, you would think that they would kind of be crooked and meander here and there.
No, absolutely straight. Complete. Like with the lineal. You know, they are just 23 kilometers over hills and mountains. Nobody has an explanation for it. And you see, we have made some scientific researches in Nazca. There is a university here in Dresden. Dresden is a city in East Germany. And I mean the Erich von Däniken Society and the Erich von Däniken Foundation, we paid over 150,000 euros for the university in Dresden to make certain measurements at the plain of Nazca. I was asking, for example, is there something which is maybe a mineral or whatever, which is not explainable, which should not be on Nazca? What about the magnetic fields? Has the magnetic field on the Earth changed in Nazca? And why, etc.? And the fact was, the scientific outcome, we have a change of the magnetic field under some of these lines. You know, these lines which are made artificially. And you can even measure, you know, about 6 meters under the line, there is something which influences the magnetic field. Now, a normal average reader would say, what about 6 meters under the line? Why don't you make a hole? It's not permitted. Nazca is one of these world, UNESCO place, and you're not allowed to scratch on the surface. All what you can make is measurements from above, from the surface. You are not allowed to make any diggings. But we know for sure something is wrong in Nazca. And the scientific community did not pick up that case until today.
Well, and it seems like that whole region, because we have Nazca, we have Paracas with the elongated skulls, we have Sacsayhuaman with the carved stones that are unexplainable in my mind. That whole, you know, the Inca Trail, that whole area is just so full of mysteries, and I find it interesting that no one's really exploring it. Well,
we always want to be reasonable. We are in a society which suggests be reasonable. For example, normal astronomers say, and they are correct, between the stars is such and such a distance. This distance is measured in light years. It is not possible to move the light years from one star to another. So this is reasonable. If you have this in your mind, you say, why extraterrestrials? They should never have been able to visit us, even if they do exist. Or in the scientific community, you say, if extraterrestrials exist, they would look completely different than the humans, because evolution on another world grows up completely different. And this is only partly true, because we could be the offsprings of another society. Like the old holy book said, the gods created humans according to their own image. So then they are looking similar. So we always wanted to be reasonable. The same thing happened in archaeology. We say Stone Age people made that and that temple. And in most of the cases, it's correct. But nobody asks more questions. When I have come the first time up to Pumapunku, Pumapunku is in Bolivia, in the highland, is about 4,000 meters high. There we have a temple where you immediately realize this temple was made by humans. It's human stone cutting, it's chiseling, etc. But just a few kilometers away, you find other stones in the ground which are cut in such a precise work with small lines, grooves, etc., that it is impossible for Stone Age people to do it. You even find prefabricated blocks. That means like Lego stones. You just can put them together. That means planning. Planning means writing. Finally, we know how hard the stone is. You know, granite, for example, is hard, has the figure number 8. So if you want to work on granite, it's such a precise work, you need a tool which is harder than granite. But the Stone Age people had no tools harder than granite. Or we find blocks which have a weight of 80 tons. Stone Age people were not able to move 80-ton blocks, platforms, from one point to the other. And then at the same thing, you always have mythology. There, in Pumapunku, in the highland of Bolivia, when the Spanish conquerors come up there, the Indians were all around, including the ruler of the India, the Inca. And the Spanish asked the natives, who has done this? Not even we Spanish people would be able to make such a precise work. We would not be able to move, to transport such blocks. And then the natives, including the Inca ruler, said, it was not us who made this. It was the gods who made this in one simple night. Which gods? The gods from the sky. The gods who were descending with loud smoke and fire and trembling from the sky. The question remains, why have the gods done such thing? I have a possible answer.
I'd love to hear
when we, for example, our mountain climber, they go to the Himalaya. Now you always use a base camp. You don't want to take all your material, your stuff, your photo apparat, your technological stuff up to the top of the mountain. So you make a basic camp. The same thing happened with extraterrestrials some thousands of years ago. There was a mother spaceship surrounding the Earth, and from the mother spaceship, smaller vehicles have come down to the Earth. Today in America, you would call them space shuttles. From these space shuttles, again, smaller vehicles came out. Like on the moon, we have had the landing robot, we had the moon car, etc. And now the natives, now the extraterrestrials, they start to make their ethnological exploration. But at certain places, they say, stop, here we stay for 2 or 3 years. We want to study the natives. There is a tribe. We want to teach them a little. And now they start to create a base camp for themselves. Base camp where they can deposit their high technology so that it is not destroyed by animals or by the weather, etc. That's the solution. Later, the gods disappear, and what is left is the base camp. And now the natives come. And the natives look with their eyes to this perfectly cut stone, and they say, the gods made it. We are not able to do it. And now the natives start to create a temple at the same place because it has become a holy place. So we have two different things to see. The technology of the extraterrestrials, which was not Stone Age technology, and the technology of our Stone Age people, which we can perfectly understand.
Is that what you think was going on at Baalbek, where we have those
Baalbek too? Oh yes, Baalbek.
Baalbek
is Baalbek is in Lebanon. No, today no tourists can go to Baalbek anymore, at least at the moment, because they still have this war there. You know, this Islamic and Arabic war there. But Baalbek has a gigantic terrace, absolutely gigantic. Their stone block were moved of 900 tons. Imagine this, 900 tons, and not one, about 60 of it. This is not a flat landscape. It's hill and mountains. So we have no idea how Stone Age people could have moved 90-ton blocks over hills. But the legend again says, in the beginning, this was a place of the gods. From here, they have come down from the sky, and from here they started. Later, the Babylonians and later the Romans constructed a temple at the same place. But the beginning, the oldest was not the temple. The oldest was a terrace, a platform of Baalbek, put together of gigantic stones.
Gigantic stones. If you were to pick, and I this might be a hard question to answer. I mean, easy but hard. If you were to pick one group whose art, myth, and culture clearly demonstrates that we were visited by extraterrestrials in the past, who would you pick?
I have two possibilities. One are the Holy Scriptures, and the others are the hard facts, something which everyone can see with his eyes. In the Holy Scriptures, we have a book called the Book of Enoch. It comes from Ethiopia. And there is a man, his name was Enoch. He clearly writes in the first person, that means eyewitness person, what happened at his time. He was taken up by beings, he says, they were not from this earth. They did not breathe like humans did, etc. He came up to what today we would call a mother spaceship. He learned their language. They taught him in astronomy, in calendar, etc., and then they brought him back. So parts of the Book of Enoch are absolutely convincing. If we go to the hard facts, you must go to Mexico, to Palenque. Palenque is one of the Maya cities, and in Palenque is one of the temple called the Temple of Inscriptions, because there were over 800 inscriptions found there in 1952. Then, under the temple, Professor Dr. Rutz found a secret tomb, a grave, and in this grave was covered with a large tombstone. I say large because there is 3 meter 80 long, 2 meter 20 large. That's quite one block. And on this block, chiseled out, an incredible picture. You see something like a frame. And inside this frame, a man is sitting, bending forward, almost like a racing motorcyclist. He has some mask on his nose, like an oxygen mask, and he clearly uses his 2 hands to manipulate some controls. You even see the finger of his left hand who is putting it up. He sits on a chair, and then behind him, out of the frame, you see a linking flame, like fire, coming out. Now, in Maya archaeology, it was clear that this stone represents Pakal. And this is correct, because we have the writings of Pakal on the stone. Pakal was the second last ruler of Palenque. But in the past, archaeologists always thought that Pakal is just descending into the earth. He's falling into the earth. And out of his body is something like the tree of life or the cross of life. Now, in modern time, and this is just 2 years ago, Professor Dr. Stewart, by the way, from the United States, he's the best, the newest, and the most modern professor who can read Maya scripture. He says, no, it is Pakal, that's true, but Pakal is not falling into the earth, and it has nothing to do with the tree of life or the cross of life. Pakal is driving out to the sky, to the universe. It all has to do with universe and with stars. So our meaning has changed. And if you stand before this stone, you go to the internet, Palenque platform, you will find it. Or you see our television, Ancient Aliens, has showed it. It's fantastic. You are just shocked. And this piece of stone is thousands of years old.
Well, and it seems very congruent when you look at cultures around the world. They're always taking some kind of a boat or something when they die to get back to the heavens or to transcend into the next world.
Of course. The same thing happens with the old Egyptian. In old Egypt, we had the so-called pyramid texts. They date back to the pyramid of Unas, for example, the 5th dynasty, back to the 3rd dynasty. In years, that means about 2,600 BC, 2,700 BC, so from today, about 4,700 years. And the walls of these tombs are full with texts, with hieroglyphs. And we were able to translate these hieroglyphs. And there we find incredible things. Some of the pharaohs says, you, God, you took me with your ship into the sky. I was flowing over the earth, etc. But in the past, we always interpreted these translations as psychological explanations. It's just a wish or a dream of the king after he's dead. In reality, was not a dream. He simply spoke about facts which happened at his time. He was taken up for a ride. He was flying over the planet. He was looking down to his kingdom. That's why Egypt is full of the sign with the winged sun. You always see a sun who has wing on. So it's always the same thing worldwide.
Exactly. I'm going to shift gears here a little bit because we only have so much time, and I feel I need to ask you this. One question that seems reoccurring in this phenomena is why? Why did they come here? Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's the best question of all. I don't know. We have been making so-called brainstorming sessions, and we have asked us the same questions. Why? We have come to about 15 possible answers, and we have no final answer. But I think it is part of the intelligence in the universe to grow, to spread out, to multiply themselves. Soon as we find planets which are similar, planets which are not too hot and not too cold, planets like our Earth. And in the meantime, we know that only in our Milky Way we have about 5 billion of Earth-like planets. So soon as you have planets like this, you want to spread out. You want to spread out your form of intelligence, like we did it in a primitive way on Earth in our colonial times.
One of the things, and I think it's wonderful to hear this from you. In all of the writing, in all of the mythology, in all of the text or oral law that has come down to us, we don't have that answer. There's never been any insights into why they came, why they were here, what their purpose was, other than that they created us. That seems pretty clear.
In ancient Indian texts, in the Mahabharata or in the Vedic texts, 2 or 3 times some human asked their gods, why have you come here? What was the reason? And the answer was always, we come here to study you. So like ethnologists. Interesting.
You made the statement earlier in the interview that they were here and then they left. So you don't believe that there has been visitation over the years since antiquity?
Oh, yes. I believe again now. I was always a very skeptic, at least for at least 30, 40 years. I was very skeptic in the UFO stories, because there was too many rubbish and nonsense around. Also, they were nice and honest people. But in the meantime, I have changed my opinion. You know, some years ago, I had the chance to meet Professor Dr. John Mack. John Mack was a Harvard professor, and he would publish a book called Abductions, about the abductions of humans by extraterrestrials. And in the last years, I had the chance in, the contact in the desert, Joshua Tree, etc., to meet wonderful personalities who had contact with extraterrestrials. So for the moment, I really start to believe somebody is observing us again. Somebody is teaching our language, learning our language. Somebody is trying to find out what are we, what political systems, what religious systems do we have. They study us. Maybe they want to find out, could we be dangerous? What kind of weapons do we have? But something is going on in the past 30 years. And maybe they return, they are already back, and they don't show up at the moment.
Why do you think we've lost sight of our past?
It's probably because of religion, but also because of education. As I said before, education means scientific education, and scientific education has to be reasonable. It has to make sense. And extraterrestrials, for the last 2,000-3,000 years, made no sense. Our science, our modern science, is maybe about 50, 60, or 70 years old. And it made no sense to think about extraterrestrials. But in the meantime, the situation has changed. We know we have Earth-like planets out there. We know it is possible to travel from star to star. In the meantime, we have an opener mind, and we should reconsider the visit of the extraterrestrials, be it in the deep past or be it in present time again. We should put it on a level of scientific. At the moment, it's not scientific because science wants to be reasonable. I always say to my followers, in that case, be unreasonable.
Well, and it seems like today we have technology that somewhat parallels or rivals what you read about in a lot of the ancient stories.
Of course. Yes. Well, oh, God, I have, as I said, many books on the market. And if you read it, you sooner or later, because you can control everything which I write and I speak to, sooner or later you came to the same conclusion as I. I had a lot of scientific criticisms, and most of them were wonderful and integral personality who always thought, this is all rubbish, what this Erich von Däniken says. And then we sit together, quiet, friendly, and had a scientific discussions. And after 2 hours, they always said to me, Erich, we didn't know this. We had no information about this. So we change our meaning as time changed.
Do you feel vindicated now that the paradigm and toward the whole idea of extraterrestrials in our past has changed?
Of course, I am happy. I mean, in the meantime, I am, nearly 80 years old. My brain works perfect. I'm still traveling. And by the way, I will be in the United States this year at least twice. One is this Contact in the Desert, Joshua Tree on May 29th. And the other visit in the United States is the Edgar Cayce IRA in Virginia Beach in the end of October. So I am happy that I am invited worldwide. And they present me as a sort of a living legend.
You're a man that needs no introduction, in my mind. Let me ask you this one last question. Your work has influenced millions of people around the world. What do you hope your legacy will be in 20, 50, 100 years from now?
I hope that what I started with this, will never die again. In the meantime, too many other authors around the world and absolutely integral personalities have come up with their book and with similar stories. Also now on the market, we have the first scientific books written by scientists of their special branch, for example, from philosophy or from the technological point of view. So I think what I started will not die out anymore. If they call me later in 25 years, I was a fool or I had just had enough fantasy, it doesn't matter. Important is that we learn this planet was visited by extraterrestrials in the deep past. They promised to return, and they will return.
Well, and I think that's going to be a very interesting day, if they're not already here. If the contact that people are having isn't contact with these gods that we were in contact with before.
I would exclude nothing. Everything is possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Erich, I know that you have a lot going on. You have a lot on your plate, so I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Thank you so much for coming on and spending time with me. You have made my day.
I have been happy to be able to talk to you and that you give me the chance to talk to me. Please tell the people in the United States when I'm in the United States again. So on the 29th of May in Contact in the Desert, Joshua Tree, and at Edgar Cayce's place in Virginia Beach, 9th to 11th October. Bye-bye and thank you. Ciao.
Well, okay, Erich, thank you very much. All right, bye-bye.
Ciao, thank you. Ciao.
That's Erich von Däniken, the author of Chariots of the Gods and 54 other books. His website is Däniken.com. And next week, we're going to be speaking with Laird Scranton about the point of origin. Until next time, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser to www.justenergyradio.com for more show information and to contact Dr.